meeting today. Okay, so you had the two No. You're watching. Okay, ich war halt davon gedacht, damit es nicht sehr. Hallo, grüß dich, hi, ja. Ja, die kommen ja immer an.
Lisa? Lisa?
Ich habe vergessen, das war schon erledigt. Sind wir draußen noch?
Ihren Namen verraten?
Die stehen alle draußen, man weiß natürlich auch nicht, wer ins Theater geht und wer hier ist.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are all the seats named? No, you have many people. Good.
You look very good tonight.
Gott. Mit dem Dudelplatz nicht, aber so sieht man sich einfach, ja. Das ist auch ein Grund, warum wir jeden Tag nicht angekreuzt haben. Ne?
Welcome to Reporters Without Borders 2019 Press Freedom Awards.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome. What a wonderful place filled with wonderful people. So happy to have you all here. Das Deutsche Theater Berlin is the perfect venue for the Press Freedom Award 2019. And I just want to say hello, welcome, guten Abend, bonsoir, iyi akşamlar. You can applause again if you like to. So that will be the same thing the whole evening. I feel so honored to be with you, to host tonight, to join you all in celebrating and supporting the work of the extraordinary journalists we want to honor in the next, I think, 2 hours. My name is Pina Atalay, and we just heard, of course, we have to say it, the marvelous musicians of the Varian Fry Quartet from the Berliner Philharmoniker, and we will hear them later tonight, so another round of applause for them, please. Thank you. Die Welt zu Gast bei Freunden, a time to make friends. Allow me to just use the saying we used at the football World Cup 13 years ago. It's 13 years ago. It's very fitting for tonight, and we are happy to have you here in Berlin. It's a very special city, as you know. I hope that some of you had the time and the chance to just visit Berlin, and it's not your first time. And of course, we want to honor the tireless work of the extraordinary men and women. We honor them because they deserve it to be celebrated. They are really persons who have significant personal risks taken in their pursuit of the truth, exposing corruption and keeping governments accountable. As journalists, we should all support each other. That's why we are here tonight. And that has been the work of RSF for many, many, many years. And so please welcome on stage Christophe Delroy, Secretary General of RSF.
Mesdames et Messieurs, bonsoir. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, Herr Regierender Bürgermeister, Freundinnen und Freunde. Yakshemla. October 2nd will mark 1 year since the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. His last column in the Washington Post, sent just before he died and published just after, turned out to be very accurate. He denounced these Arab governments whose very existence relies on the control of information. They block the internet, they arrest reporters, they even exercise pressure on advertisers. The column was titled, "What the Arab world needs most is free expression." As of yesterday, we know that in his last words, very last words, the journalist told his killers to not keep his mouth closed. It was because of his asthma, but it is very symbolic that Jamal's last words were, "Do not keep my mouth closed." At least 30 journalists are currently detained in Saudi Arabia. We continue to work for their release. 1 year ago, yesterday, you may remember it, Jan, was exactly 1 year since the creation of the Commission on Information and Democracy initiated by Reporters Without Borders. 2 weeks ago, our initiative was supported by the G7. This proves that there is a potential for action, that our determination can help in order to prevent press freedom predators or private companies with their own interests from setting the rules for the global information and communication space. This is deeply connected, in fact, with what Jamal wrote in his last published sentences, when he called for the creation of an independent international forum. We are precisely creating a forum on information and democracy. 1 year ago, this award ceremony was organized for the first time outside of France, in London, with the idea that it will now move around the world, reflecting the truly global nature of our organization. I take this occasion to thank our board members and staff in all our sections and offices for their huge achievements. We are so honored that tonight, this year's edition of the prize has been organized and is hosted by our colleagues at Reporter ohne Grenzen. Tonight, Berlin is a world capital of press freedom. I have, of course, in mind all those journalists of whom Berlin can be extremely proud. And I have in mind Karl von Ossietzky. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1936 and could not attend the ceremony. There will be some echoes of that tonight, with laureates prevented from leaving their countries. Ossietzky's newspaper was Die Weltbühne, in English, the world stage. Jamal again, in his last written paragraph, spoke about the need for citizens to be informed about global events. The world stage. Different periods, same spirit. I get back to Reporter ohne Grenzen. Michael Rediske and Gemma Persgen, who were among the founders, haven't lost any of their determination. They cannot imagine how much we value their commitment, as we value the leadership of Christian Mier and the work of his team. I'm so proud that we have with us here tonight 3 awardees from previous years. Swati Chateau-Vedi, she's supposed to be here, I guess. Ah, you are, excellent. Grigory Pasco, I know that you are here, Gregory. And Jan Lunda. Jan Linda, who is also a member of the Commission on Information Democracy, I will always remember 2 things. The breakfast we had the day after Cumhuriyet got the award, and you, a few days after, you were put in jail. And you knew that it could happen. And also, the time it took to cross Istiklal, the avenue in Istanbul, just after your release. I guess 20 minutes just, you shook so many hands. And I have to say that it's a huge pleasure to be with you tonight, also Dilek, and to see you with Jan. This was a moment that we really expected for a long time. Sometimes we succeed to get good news, even to create good news. Not artificially, I promise. It was such good news when our Reuters colleagues in Myanmar were released, or when Shaukan, the photographer, was released in Egypt this year. More recently, it was an incredible feeling when the Mauritanian blogger Mohamed Keïtia was released. He had been sentenced to death penalty a few years ago. And it was such a good news this summer, when our representative in Turkey, Erol, was acquitted. Unfortunately, we were informed a few days ago that prosecutors appealed against acquittal. We feel sometimes like Sisyphus. We have to roll our stone up the mountain again. We can do this thanks to our supporters. I would like to thank all the supporters that we have in this room, and I know that they are numerous. Our partners, the international French-speaking TV channel TV5 Monde, which is a long-time partner of this prize. Posteo, an independent email provider based in Berlin, focused on greater security, privacy, and sustainability. And Intan Group, which focuses on professional services in the area of subscription support and media distribution. You may know the sentence that Albert Camus wrote about Sisyphus. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. I think we can be happy if we respect this principle, despite the pessimism of the intellect. We can have the optimism of the will. Let's have a nice evening together tonight. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Christophe Deloire. Yeah, what an international light. Paris, London, Beijing, Moscow, Yaoundé, Valletta, Riyadh, and even more, and of course Berlin. 30 years after the Berlin Wall came down, we are here all together. We are grateful, of course, to have on the special night Michael Müller with us, the mayor of Berlin. And perhaps he's a little in der Höhle des Löwen, in the lion's den. Many journalists, many investigative journalists. Of course, we also report about what's going on in this city, but now we are happy to have you here. Michael Müller, please welcome on stage.
Ja, lieber Herr Deloire, Herr Diske, Frau Gloger, meine Damen und Herren, aber vor allen Dingen natürlich auch sehr geehrte Nominierte für diesen wichtigen Award. Ihnen allen ein herzliches Willkommen hier im Deutschen Theater, ein herzliches Willkommen in Berlin. Ja, in der Stadt der Freiheit möchte ich natürlich gerne auch nach der freundlichen Begrüßung eben, in der Stadt der Freiheit, möchte ich auch gerne sagen. Damit wird ja Berlin doch in den letzten Jahren sehr in Verbindung gebracht. Offenheit, Toleranz, Freiheit, eben Berlin, die Stadt der Freiheit. Und ja, ich glaube, das ist sie auch, eine Stadt der Freiheit, so empfinde ich es, so begeistern sich viele Menschen eben, ja auch für Berlin in den letzten Jahren, die zu uns kommen. 40.000 pro Jahr kommt zusätzlich in unsere Stadt, um hier zu leben und zu arbeiten und vielleicht auch dieses besondere Lebensgefühl der Freiheit und Offenheit zu genießen. Aber gerade in diesem Jahr, im 30. Jahr des Mauerfalls, am 9. November werden wir das feiern, 30 Jahre Mauerfall in unserer Stadt, in unserem Land. Gerade in diesem Jahr ist uns natürlich auch besonders bewusst, dass es ja keine Selbstverständlichkeit ist, in Freiheit und Frieden und Offenheit zu leben, sondern dass man diese Freiheit erkämpfen muss und dass man sie jeden Tag gemeinsam auch verteidigen muss, diese Freiheit. Darum geht es. Und die Pressefreiheit, die Meinungsfreiheit, die Freiheit der Religion, alles das sind wichtige Grundlagen für ein gutes, demokratisches und friedliches Zusammenleben. Und dafür stehen Sie, dafür steht Reporter ohne Grenzen, dafür machen Sie seit Jahren eine großartige Arbeit, um eben Menschen, die für diesen Freiheitskampf stehen, zu ermutigen und zu unterstützen. Sie engagieren sich gegen restriktive Mediengesetze international in den unterschiedlichsten Ländern. Sie machen darauf aufmerksam, wo die journalistische Arbeit eingeschränkt und eingegrenzt wird. Sie helfen ganz konkret Journalistinnen und Journalisten, die Hilfe brauchen, die Unterstützung brauchen für ihre tägliche Arbeit. Sie sensibilisieren die Öffentlichkeit, wenn Sie darüber berichten, dass alleine in diesem Jahr schon wieder 25 Journalistinnen und Journalisten im Rahmen ihrer beruflichen Tätigkeit ihr Leben verloren haben. Alles das ist eine unschätzbar wichtige Arbeit. Und ich möchte ein Beispiel dafür nennen, wie wir jeden Tag gefordert sind, sehr sensibel und sehr achtsam auch mit diesem hohen Gut der Pressefreiheit umzugehen und wie sehr wir uns dafür engagieren müssen. Ein kleiner Ausschnitt aus der Berliner Politik. Seit 2,5 Jahren gibt es auch im Berliner Parlament eine rechtspopulistische Partei. Und als die in das Parlament eingezogen sind, dachte ich natürlich, das wären ganz schlimme und harte Auseinandersetzungen werden im Zusammenhang mit Integrationsfragen oder im Zusammenhang mit der Flüchtlingsaufnahme in Berlin. Es ist etwas ganz anderes passiert. Zu diesen Themen gibt es wenig Auseinandersetzungen, weil die Partei sich dazu im Parlament, im politischen Schlagabtausch relativ wenig äußert. Die harten Auseinandersetzungen werden im Parlament geführt zu den Fragen der Gleichstellungspolitik und der Medien- und der Pressefreiheit. Härteste Auseinandersetzungen dazu, und da werden Unterschiede deutlich. Da wird deutlich, worum es einigen geht mit diesem Schlagwort der Lügenpresse. Worum es eigentlich geht, nämlich ein Pfeiler, eine Säule unserer Demokratie und unseres freien und offenen Lebens einzuschränken, um eigene politische Ziele durchsetzen zu können. Und das wiederum macht deutlich, was wir für eine Aufgabe gemeinsam zu bewältigen haben. Im Kleinen, mit unseren Mitteln, versuchen wir, Ihre Arbeit zu unterstützen. Durch eigene Programme für Wissenschaftlerinnen und Wissenschaftler, für Journalistinnen und Journalisten, denen wir helfen wollen, wenn sie in ihrem Land nicht mehr frei und ungehindert arbeiten können. Wir haben gemeinsam mit Reporter ohne Grenzen ein Stipendienprogramm aufgelegt, um Reporterinnen und Reportern eben auch Unterstützung zuteil werden zu lassen, die in Krisen- und Kriegsgebieten arbeiten. Ich glaube, dass das sehr wichtig ist. Aber ich glaube noch viel mehr, dass es wirklich darauf ankommt, jeden Tag in den unterschiedlichsten Rollen, mit den unterschiedlichsten Möglichkeiten deutlich zu machen, dass ohne Pressefreiheit eben kein demokratisches Zusammenleben möglich ist. Denn Pressefreiheit garantiert Transparenz. Pressefreiheit garantiert Kontrolle der Mächtigen. Pressefreiheit garantiert einen ungehinderten Zugang zu eben freien, zu ungefilterten Informationen. Darauf kommt es an. Meinungsfreiheit, Pressefreiheit, Religionsfreiheit, Demonstrationsfreiheit, das alles ist untrennbar miteinander verbunden. In diesem Sinne, meine Damen und Herren, möchte ich mich ganz herzlich bei Ihnen bedanken, bei Reporter ohne Grenzen, bei der internationalen Organisationen, aber auch ganz konkret hier bei der deutschen Sektion, die nun auch einen wunderbaren Geburtstag feiert. Der 25. Geburtstag wird hier gefeiert, deswegen nun auch diese Preisverleihung mit Sicherheit in Berlin. Ich glaube, dass das ein gutes Miteinander ist, nicht die Höhle des Löwen für Politiker. Das können wir und das müssen wir auch ertragen, dass wir kritisch begleitet werden. Das gehört zu unserem Beruf dazu. Und ich glaube, seriöse Politikerinnen und Politiker legen einen großen Wert darauf, mit Journalistinnen und Journalisten zusammenarbeiten zu können, die eben frei und ungehindert ihrem Beruf nachgehen, so wie wir es auch tun wollen. Meine Damen und Herren, ein großes Dankeschön noch einmal für Ihre Arbeit, für die Arbeit Ihrer Organisation, aber Sie stehen stellvertretend eben für Tausende Journalistinnen und Journalisten, die weltweit arbeiten, weltweit mitunter unter schwierigsten Bedingungen arbeiten und deren unsere Solidarität gehört. Also herzlich willkommen in Berlin. Ich freue mich, dass Sie hier sind. Ich freue mich, dass Sie in der Stadt der Freiheit, in der Stadt der Pressefreiheit, wie Sie es genannt haben, auch heute unser Gast sind. Ich hoffe, dass Sie den Abend und vielleicht auch die Stadt ein bisschen genießen können in den nächsten Tagen. Ich wünsche Ihnen aber vor allen Dingen viel Mut und Kraft für Ihre Arbeit und für die Unterstützung der Journalistinnen und Journalisten, die darauf dringend angewiesen sind. Alles Gute und vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank, Michael Müller. Yeah, you just talked about it. 25 years, Reporter ohne Grenzen. We also celebrate this important anniversary of an organization doing so much for press freedom. It's not only me who wants to send my congratulations to the organization. There are also many more people who couldn't be here tonight, but who want to say hello and thank you and congratulations. Let's have a look.
Pressefreiheit ist die Freiheit von 200 reichen Leuten, ihre Meinung zu verbreiten. Das hat Paul Sethe 1965 geschrieben. Damals war das nicht falsch. Heute ist Pressefreiheit die Freiheit von 3 Milliarden Menschen mit Online-Zugang, ihre Meinung ins Netz zu stellen.
It's clear that Reporters Without Borders Germany, just as RSF globally, is an essential part of the advocacy for free press, for freedom of expression, and for democratic principles around the world. And it's my wish for RSF Germany and for RSF as a whole that that leadership will continue today and well into the future.
We must defend press freedom precisely to hear what somebody somewhere does not want us to hear. I'm impressed by your expertise and tenacity in defending media actors, independent voices, and imprisoned journalists. And I strongly support your initiatives in promoting reliable and quality information in the digital era, and in particular your Journalist Trust Initiative and your Commission on Information and Democracy.
Ich will mir eine Welt ohne Presse- und Informationsfreiheit gar nicht vorstellen. Ich will von kompetenten, leidenschaftlichen und neugierigen Reportern unterrichtet werden und über Missstände aufgeklärt werden. Ich möchte komplexe Situationen verstehen, weil ich dadurch eine eigene Meinung bilden kann. Und das bedeutet Freiheit.
The freedom of information is the most essential tool for an open-minded and vibrant culture and society. I'm a member of Reporter Without Borders, and I wish our organization strength and energy and all what it needs to stay firm against all efforts to undermine this important work.
ذكرى سنوية سعيدة لتأسيس القسم الألماني من مراسلون بلا حدود. شكرا لجهودكم بدعم الديمقراطيات من خلال الدفاع عن حرية التعبير. شكرا لجهودكم بحماية الصحفيين حول العالم وحماية أمننا الرقمي. لا تنسوا الصحفيين السوريين المعتقلين بسجون النظام السوري، ولا تنسوا الإعلاميين والمواطنين الصحفيين اللي عم يتعرضوا لخطر الموت يوميا بالشمال السوري.
Bei uns herrscht Pressefreiheit und da fragt man sich schon, wie kriegen eigentlich diese Leute bei Reporter ohne Grenzen Sektion Deutschland ihren Tag rum? Was machen die? Fragt man sich. Und dann schlägt man irgendeine Zeitung auf und liest, der Verfassungsschutz hat vielleicht bald die Möglichkeit, Journalisten digital auszuspähen. Und dann denkt man, Reporter ohne Grenzen, schön, dass es euch gibt und toi 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 für die nächsten 25.
Yeah, he's so right, Oliver Welke. Journalists all over the world risk so much to inform the society about what's going on in their countries. The experience of journalists in Germany is not comparable, I think, but even here reporters face danger sometimes. Reporters who are on the beat, reporting from demonstrations organized by nationalists, by populists, mostly in Eastern Germany, they are threatened, they are attacked, and they can't always count on the police to help them. We are fortunate to have the support of Reporter ohne Grenzen by keeping a spotlight on the issues journalists face here and all around the world. Please welcome to stage Michael Rediske, a founding member of the German section of RSF, Reporter ohne Grenzen, and he's also president of RSF International. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Vielen Dank, Herr Regierender Bürgermeister, for your kind words, Mr. Mayor, and also to Christophe Deloire for the nice welcome you made to our audience and to the German section. I address you as the Secretary General of Reporters sans frontières, and I use for this time the French name, since France is the motherland of our organization, and the marvelous city of Paris is still and will continue to be the center of our operations. However, over the last 10 years, we have become more and more international in our functioning, just like this award ceremony of our Press Freedom Awards. We no longer award the prize only in Paris or in Strasbourg, but we have brought the ceremony to London last year and this year to Berlin. Thank you very much, Christoph, for this. The German section feels honored to host this event, especially this year, which marks, as has been said, the 25th birthday of Reporter ohne Grenzen. Our German board consciously decided not to celebrate the anniversary with our own national event, but rather with our parent organization and all the other national sections as we gather together here in Berlin today. The scope of our bureau's work in Berlin has increased considerably over the past decade. But this work is only one element of the whole international work. A very large part of what we present in Germany here is only possible due to the efforts of the International Secretariat in Paris, as well as the work of all other sections and offices and the many correspondents in 140 countries all over the world. Today, I remember one of the first cases in which we were able to save somebody directly from prison and torture. The journalist Dodorjon Atovulayev from Tajikistan was detained at Moscow airport. The Russian Secret Service wanted to extradite him to the Tajik government. A concerted action started, and our friend Thomas Roth, who then was the studio director in Moscow of the first German TV channel, the ARD, he drove to the airport with his camera team and created media publicity, not only in Germany. Finally, Dodorjon was allowed to travel onward. Today he lives in Berlin and continues his journalistic work for Tajikistan from here. Dodorjon is with us today. Welcome. I can't see you now, but somewhere around you'll be there. Okay. Yes, creating awareness, public awareness. This is one of our most pertinent tasks. Today, this task also spans to the area of internet censorship and wiretapping techniques that threaten critical journalists. Just as we have always been concerned about physical threats to journalists, today we are more and more concerned about the uncontrolled power of intermediaries like Facebook and Google. We are troubled about the distortion
Germany are on the top here. But there are also governments sharply criticized by us, such as Saudi Arabia or Serbia, who now feel compelled to speak directly with us. However, and above all, we are proud that so many people all over the world stand behind us, who do not want uniform, controlled news, but who value liberal democracy and pluralistic media. The nominees of our Press Freedom Award are the most outstanding examples of those for whom we are fighting. Today, we have only 3 awards available. However, all nominees, in fact, would deserve the prize. Therefore, we congratulate all of them for their courageous work. I would also like to recognize our members and donors who make our work possible. Many of them followed our invitation and are with us today. We are very grateful for your support and your presence at this event. There's one of our supporters, however, who unfortunately cannot be present today. However, we are happy that he has sent us a video message. I'm speaking of our Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, Heiko Maas. And before he will be just now on the screen, there's only one thing for me left to say. I wish all of us an interesting evening and invite you to our party after the ceremony, which may last beyond midnight. Let's celebrate press freedom and the hard work everybody at RSF is doing to preserve this freedom. Thank you very much.
Pressefreiheit. Die Pressefreiheit zu schützen ist eine unserer wichtigsten Aufgaben. Und zwar in unserem eigenen Land und international. Denn letztlich eine freie, unabhängige und vielfältige Presselandschaft ist die Voraussetzung für jede funktionierende Demokratie. Und dafür setzt sich auch Reporter ohne Grenzen ein und das seit nunmehr 25 Jahren. Wenn man jemandem zum Geburtstag gratuliert, wünscht man ja eigentlich ein langes Leben. In diesem Fall ist es vielleicht ein bisschen anders. Es wäre schön, wenn es weltweit so um die Pressefreiheit bestellt wäre, dass es Organisationen wie Reporter ohne Grenzen nicht mehr geben müsste. Doch die Namen Khashoggi und Kuciak stehen stellvertretend für mehr als 60 Morde an Journalistinnen und Journalisten und unzählige Bedrohungen im vergangenen Jahr. Weltweit beobachten wir eine Tendenz, Reporterinnen und Reporter zu beeinflussen, einzuschüchtern und zu diffamieren. Und deswegen ist der Einsatz von Reporter ohne Grenzen auch in Zukunft nötiger denn je. Und deshalb, ich danke den Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeitern von Reporter ohne Grenzen von Herzen für 25 Jahre wichtiger und auch erfolgreicher Arbeit und ich wünsche der Organisation viel Kraft für die Zukunft.
Schön, danke schön, vielen Dank. Applaus, danke. Muss auch sein, die arbeiten hard. They're working hard for us to make this night happen. And thanks again to the very Frei Quartet. And yeah, we have to say goodbye, I think. Is it right, Michael Müller? No, noch ein bisschen? Okay, because he has a full dance card tonight. Noch ein paar Veranstaltungen, die kommen, aber Sie sagen Bescheid? Ja, okay, gut. Okay, then we can welcome a very special person who embodies the spirit of RSF. His impact on the world of journalism was commendable, publishing the NSA affair. The former editor-in-chief of The Guardian, he just came directly from Oxford, I think. He's teaching there, and he's waiting backstage for you. So please welcome Alan Rusbridger.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. I come straight from a country that loves journalism so much. We've just appointed a former reporter as Prime Minister. Not many reporters get to run countries, which is probably just as well. I don't know what to say about Boris Johnson's career. One word that people used about his reporting was that it was very creative. Another word people used was inventive. His career at the Times was a brief one because it proved a little too inventive. His talent for fiction outshone his talent for fact. But he moved to the Daily Telegraph and reported from Brussels, where again he gained a fantastic reputation for his amazing imagination. Anyway, he may need to be very creative in the next coming weeks, so we wish him well. This is an evening to celebrate people who remained reporters, and to celebrate the courage of many of our colleagues around the world, and to meet in solidarity as friends and peers, and people proud to be here to honor the work of people who go out and bear witness on our behalf, reporters. Our lives are all heavily influenced these days by metrics and data, so as we gather to think about journalism, I just want to give you three separate data points. The first is 12,000, which is the number of false or misleading claims made by the leader of the free world since taking office. And we owe that figure to the Washington Post, which measures these things and which calculates that in recent months, Donald Trump is averaging an astonishing 20 to 30 false claims a day. The second statistic is 80, and that's sadly the number of journalists who were killed last year. That's well over one a week, and about 350 journalists were also imprisoned and a further 60 held hostage. The third figure is 45, which is the percentage of newspaper journalists thrown out of work in the richest country in the world in the past 10 years. So that's nearly half the journalists in America without a job. So there are three very different kinds of figures. One's a snapshot of the scale of false information being injected by just one person, albeit a very influential one, who can speak directly to 60 million people with a stroke of his thumb. One is a measure of the increasing repression and danger that faces journalists around the world as they try to do this business of bearing witness. And the third is the continuing story of an industry in economic decline and of a disastrous fallout in terms of the number of journalists who are able to make a living. And it's not a great set of metrics to think about as we gather tonight. And of course it's possible to paint an even bleaker picture. Donald Trump, for instance, is just one purveyor of lies and falsehoods. We've created a machinery to spray out lies and hatred and confusion on an unimaginable scale. Billions of people can literally now create their own version of the truth. Then there's the attempt to discredit the whole craft or calling of journalism. And we've always been used to crackpots and despots doing that, but not the so-called leader of the free world, who, in addition to telling lies himself, deliberately and repeatedly does his best to delegitimize journalists who do their best to seek the truth. And of course, what Donald Trump does, others mimic. And you can see the ripple effect around the world as people with even less respect for a free and independent media feel empowered to do their worst. And what about the rewards for people who do so much, including risking their lives to keeping this supply of trusted and reliable information in the world? Not enough people want to pay us. They see no obligation to help keep this reliable stream of information. Not enough people trust us. Not enough people say they can even tell good information from bad information any longer. A recent Edelman survey on trust found that 2/3 of respondents, 2/3, say they can no longer tell a good source from a bad source. So we're living in an age of information chaos, a world in which we're gradually realizing that a society without agreed facts is a frightening society. It's a dysfunctional community where the norms of politics and science, governance, law, and discourse no longer work. My truth is as good as your truth. There is no truth. They all lie. Don't believe facts, believe me. Trust emotions, not rationality. And a world of information chaos is a really dangerous world. Who cares about the complex truths about climate change or vaccines or migration or taxation or healthcare or torture or inequality or free speech or a free press? My truth is as good as your truth. And also we have a world of information inequality with well-informed elites, and who cares about the rest? So God knows there are enough reasons to feel bleak, but there are many rays of hope and many beacons of hope, and I think we're here tonight because we care about those and we want to think about those. So first, perversely, those 80 journalists who died doing their job, the 350 journalists in prison, punished for a vocation, for their dogged belief that someone has to risk everything to tell society truths about itself. Well, in how many jobs do the practitioners risk so much, are willing to lay down their lives for a wider public good? The answer's not many. And that tells you something about the value of what we do. This isn't just a job, it's a calling, it's an act of service. It's something the bravest of our colleagues do not think about as being optional. It's an act of necessity. It's necessary that someone makes a sound, somebody challenges, somebody bears witness. I was thinking about this recently as we celebrated two occasions in history which we recently marked anniversaries of, and the anniversaries of state power being brought to bear on citizens. There was recently the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen Square in 1989. And in Britain, we had the 200th anniversary of Peterloo, the moment in 1819 when magistrates in Manchester sent soldiers on horseback to cut down a peaceful gathering of citizens protesting at a corrupt political system. How do we know something like the truth about these atrocities? Not because the state felt obliged to confess, quite the opposite, but because there were witnesses there on our behalf, reporters, men and women who, often at some risk to themselves, felt compelled to record what happened and to put the truth out there for all to see. Because these small acts of scrutiny are all that enable justice to be done, all that stop the worst aspects of history from repeating themselves. Power generally, not always, is less likely to behave badly if it thinks it's being watched. So while, of course, we mourn these sacrifices and campaign for the freedom of our jailed colleagues, we should also celebrate their spirit, cherish the example they set to us, feel inspired by their commitment and courage, and show that we are prepared to step up and fill the holes left by their enforced absence. Who could doubt that the recent death of Lyra McKee at the hands of mindless gunmen in Northern Ireland will have inspired others to step into her shoes? Who can fail to admire the indomitable spirit of our colleagues in Mexico? 100 journalists killed since 2000, yet still our colleagues step up to do this necessary work. Second, I think the more people stare over the precipice of societies with no reliable sources of news, no verification or independent challenge, the more people realize that in the end, we are all there is. When the last bee dies, the planet's in trouble, and I sometimes feel the same that about reporters. Remember that time when Trump had control of the White House, Congress, numerous government agencies, and the beginning of a takeover of the Supreme Court. But we, the people, had the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and the New Yorker and the Miami Herald and ProPublica and others. They were still free. In the words of Marty Baron, they went to work, not to war. And the best of what they did and still do was not only very good, it was essential. And people could see that. They understood. This is what a free press does. And people continue to understand it in many, many countries where they know an independent media is all they have. There are other beacons of hope. The collaboration between news organizations and journalists who realize that we can achieve more by working together than by competing. The surprising resilience of that form of journalism we call investigative, reporting that digs deeply, shines a light into the darkest places, sticks with a story, explores angles, demands answers, holds people properly to account. At one point, some media executives thought they could no longer afford to do this kind of reporting. Now the clever ones realize they can't afford not to, because our readers expect it. They want journalism that's on their side, that holds power to account on their behalf. And that's the final beacon of hope, of seeing journalism as well as a business, as a public service. And that way of looking at journalism is becoming sustainable. Readers will support it voluntarily, but only if they truly think that it is acting in a public interest, publishing true things about important matters that affect our lives. At The Guardian, I was lucky enough to work for a paper founded in 1821 in response to the Peterloo massacre by the first journalist who actually who wrote the first eyewitness report on that massacre, which always put its public mission, its public interest mission, ahead of profits. It wasn't founded in a wine bar by venture capitalists who saw a chance to make money, just as well because it didn't. It was founded because as early as the early 19th century, it was becoming obvious that journalism was the most effective check on unbridled power. It was a public service. No one was looking to cash in or exit within 5 or 10 years. It's been in the same ownership for nearly 200 years. And in my last 10 years of editor, we wrote about torture, rendition. We exposed tax avoidance, heartless undercover policing. We wrote about corrupt arms deals and slavery. We named fake drug peddlers, dishonest politicians. We wrote about corrupt police, financial ineptitude, governmental dishonesty, and lies about war. We published the revelations about mass surveillance by Edward Snowden and the truth finally revealed by Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange about how Reuters staff were killed by American pilots. Every one of those stories was really difficult to do, was really expensive to report, and really expensive and difficult to defend. Sometimes we had to risk millions to hire lawyers and to fight off rich and powerful interests who tried to suppress our reporting. When the British government smashed our tools of communication, we moved our reporting to a country with better protections. Now, conventional wisdom said that this intense investment in reporting was mad, particularly in the middle of a digital revolution which was upending all economic certainties. Fire all those expensive reporters and try something modest. That's what they said. But investigative reporting in the public interest actually turned out to be the business model, because The Guardian now has 1 million readers who say to them, if you're going to do journalism like that, we'll support it. But there was a qualification. They didn't want to support it as a private good, so I can read it and no one else can. That's the traditional model. But as a public good, I will give you the money so that everybody in this theatre can read it, everybody in Germany can read it, everybody in the world can read it, because that's what the world needs. It's like, I think of it as like a lighthouse. There is no business model for a lighthouse, and yet the world needs lighthouses, otherwise a lot of people are going to die and a lot of ships are going to sink. And so there's a different way of funding the public good of a lighthouse. And this idea of good journalism as a cause worth supporting is working. Think of Wikipedia or the National Public Radio or the great paper, the Texas Tribune or ProPublica, and countless other projects where people have a strong sense of what journalism is supposed to do. Because we know this digital revolution is scary. We know that it's full of triumphs and opportunities, but it's full of failures and red ink. But The Guardian's now breaking even again because the readers clearly want to support an organization which invests and investigates Cambridge Analytica, which works with colleagues to publish the Paradise Papers, to expose the truth about the appalling treatment of the Windrush generation of immigrants. And there are other models that are creeping up now. There are philanthropists who are recognizing the need for good journalism. Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, the Marshall Project. In Australia, there was a man called Graham Wood, who was an Australian entrepreneur who came to The Guardian and said, if you open The Guardian in Australia, I'll pay for it, because there's no media plurality in my country and there's no decent coverage of climate change. And if you never make any money, that's fine, you can keep the money. If you make money, you pay me back. Well, the bad news is The Guardian's now making money and we've had to pay him back. But it just needed a little vision. It just needed some money and some bravery along with the public support that then kicked in. So I think we're going to see many new forms of companies with a mission rather than simply profit at their heart. Community ventures that place the readers at the heart of journalism. A new appreciation of forms of publicly funded reporting as well as public service broadcasting. Startups to combine the best of what is happening on social media with the best that traditional journalism can do. Journalism is bound to change. It's bound to remake itself. It's bound to find new ways and new audiences. But at the heart, at its core, it's going to remain the same. And the people we recognize tonight are the best of what we aspire to do. To bear witness, to act as a check on unbridled power, to make order out of the chaos information that threatens to engulf us, to say, this is true, that isn't, this happened, that didn't, this is a fact, that isn't. Because without that and without those people, societies can't function. And luckily, as tonight shows, remarkable people will continue to step forward to do what societies need, and people will defend it and pay for it, because at its best, it's the most necessary precondition for any good society that we have. So yes, we should always remember the obstacles that we face, the people that wish us ill, and all those who feel so threatened by what we do that they will do anything to try and suppress us. But as we come together tonight to honor people with courage, we have so much to celebrate. That's sometimes hard to remember, but even more dangerous to forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan Rusbridger. Yeah, please join us. It's your applause. Thank you for your inspiring words. And if you ever get tired of London, so you're welcome in Berlin every time, yeah? I could understand it. Now it's time to present the awards to the great nominees. We want to show you all the great nominees, of course, so we have made a video so you can see them. Let's start with the award for courage.
Nominated for Reporters Without Borders 2019 Prize for Courage are Igor Rudnikov from Russia. Well known for his hard-hitting investigative reporting on corruption and the embezzlement of public funds, Rudnikov was the founder and editor of Novaya Kolesa, the leading independent newspaper in Russia's western enclave of Kaliningrad. Because of his determined reporting, he has been the target of 2 murder attempts, many prosecutions, and several police raids. He was finally jailed after investigating the undeclared real estate assets of Viktor Ledenev, a former prosecutor general in Chechnya who had been transferred to Kaliningrad. Despite the risk of being placed in solitary, he has managed to get several articles published and has just written a book from within his cell, with this epigraph: "Thought cannot be handcuffed or thrown in prison. It will always be free." He was released from jail in June 2019. Eman Al-Nafjan from Saudi Arabia, founder of the SaudiWoman.me website and author of many articles in the international media, including The Guardian and the New York Times. Eman Al-Nafjan spearheaded the Saudi women's campaign for the right to drive and against the oppressive male guardianship system in Saudi Arabia. During the Women to Drive Day, she decided to defy the law which prohibited women from driving a car by filming another woman in her own car.
Okay, you're on camera.
Eman was the passenger, holding the camera. Arrested along with other women's rights activists in May 2018, she was freed conditionally a year later. According to Saudi media, she is accused of endangering national security, maintaining suspicious contacts with foreign entities, and of being a traitor, for which she could be jailed for up to 20 years. Paolo Borrometti from Italy. An Italian writer and journalist born in Sicily in 1983, Paolo Borrometti is an expert on the Sicilian mafia. Because of his courageous reporting for the Giornale di Sicilia newspaper and La Spia, the news website he created in 2013, he has been the target of frequent threats and is protected around the clock by 5 police officers.
Io faccio il mio dovere e vado avanti.
In April 2018, the Italian police thwarted a plot to kill him and his 5 police bodyguards with a bomb. In January 2019, he received a message saying, "You have little time left." In Rome, where he now lives for safety reasons, he continues his tireless fight against organized crime, despite still being subjected to systematic intimidation. Lola Aronovich from Brazil. University academic Lola Aronovich has received hundreds of online death threats since launching a blog called Escreva Lola Escreva, or Write Lola Write, in 2008. She has since become one of Brazil's best known and most widely read feminist bloggers. Although one of the main online harassers was arrested in 2018, the threats against her and her family have continued.
Tem que ser casca grossa, não pode se deixar bater pelos comentários, pelos trolls.
Under a law that took effect in April 2018, called the Lola Law, in homage to her fight against online violence, the federal police can now take over any investigation into online crime of a misogynistic nature.
Please give them another round of applause because they can see us, I think, with the live stream. So we are online. Hello. Thank you. And now it's time to announce the winner. And announcing the winner is Susanne Kölbel, military and foreign correspondent for the news magazine Der Spiegel, reporting about countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, and she even has traveled to Saudi Arabia without state supervision. Please welcome on stage Susanne Kölbel.
The prize for courage goes to Eman Al-Nafjan, Saudi Arabia. The first time I met Imam, was exactly 7 years ago at a Starbucks coffee shop in Riyadh. She was a cautious young woman of 32 years who had started the blog SaudiWoman.com. For the first time, a Saudi woman communicated in English about what happens in women's lives in this very closed society. The kingdom was a more conservative place then. Very little known was what Saudi women think, how they live, what they wish for, what they suffer from, and what they would do differently if they had the opportunity or chance. Iman's blog gave a genuine and mature voice to Saudi women in their quest to be heard. King Salman took the throne in 2015, and 2 years later, he appointed his favorite and very ambitious son, Mohammed, to be crown prince. Immediately, the young prince started to implement his reforms and modernize the country. Some of Imam's friends then had already been arrested, but she still hoped for positive change. Anything is better than the silence and paralysis we endured for so long, for so many years, she said. At that time, Imam supported the crown prince. In a country that has treated women like children, Imam al-Nafjan's demands seemed very progressive, if not revolutionary. Self-determination, freedom of movement, the permission to drive. She and her friends advocated against the male guardianship law. They wanted to be able to decide for themselves if and where they travel, to open up a bank account, or whether they have surgery. While I lived in Saudi Arabia in 2018, Iman and I met frequently and traveled together. Her sense of humor is delightful. We laughed a lot. I admired how she juggled what so many moms do. She raised 4 children. As a professor, she taught English at the university. Her youngest was only 2 years old at the time. She was a picture of a loving, caring mom. Then the government announced that they would lift the travel ban, that they would lift the ban on car riding, and Iman and her group of female activists celebrated it as their victory. Change is possible in Saudi Arabia. Iman happily wrote on her blog. Most likely, this was her actual crime. Iman got arrested together with a group of other women and men on May 15, 2018. They were tortured and harassed, and this went on for many weeks. Iman tried to take her own life for 3 times. She can't stand to be locked up. But what exactly was her crime? Mistaking change as the result of her group's activism and vision versus the generosity of a well-meaning, benevolent ruler who knows best. 2 days ago, I returned from a business trip to Saudi Arabia. I spoke to insiders in the government. This is what they said. This is not a democracy. This is an absolute monarchy. These women are looking for fame. They look for attention. These activists violated our cultural rules. They made the kingdom look bad and the rulers look weak. This is a complicated issue because Iman al-Nafjan is very much a patriot. She loves her country. She's modest and has a beautiful mind. She never wanted attention for herself. I was not able to meet Imam during my trip. Meeting with foreigners, especially with journalists and diplomats, is considered dangerous. You can get punished just for speaking with them. Today, I'd like to ask the government of Saudi Arabia to release all women and men arrested or on trial whose only crime is that they want to be heard and recognized as self-determined citizens. Iman Al-Nafjan is silenced now. She is the best representative and ambassador Saudi Arabia could have. And if she is not welcomed in the new Saudi Arabia of Mohammed bin Salman, something must be wrong. Iman Al-Nafjan is one of the many incredible people who showed me the real Saudi Arabia while I lived there. It is my great pleasure, it's my great privilege to have met this extraordinary, kind, courageous, and lovable woman. Thank you.
Please stay with us because, yeah, we can do it together, perhaps. Oops. Ich wusste, dass das passiert. So please. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Just started with the first one. Sie können ihn gerne übergeben. Umaima Al-Najjar, please join us on stage so we can give you the prize. Please, welcome. There she is.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great honor to come here and receive such an important award on behalf of Iman Al-Nafjan. Sadly, Iman couldn't make it tonight because she is on a travel ban. Even though she was temporarily released, she is no longer allowed to communicate with journalists, write, blog, or even a tweet, or even write anything on Facebook or in social media. But I believe that receiving this award will be a recognition of Iman's work and also a recognition of the importance of journalism in contributing in political reforms. Without Iman Al-Nafjan, I don't think there would have been any political reforms in favor of women's rights in Saudi Arabia. She is the first female to start campaigning for women through social media. And she was writing in a blog in which give a very accurate, reflective image of human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. And I believe that she's very grateful to win this award. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask you something, if you mind, please. I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask you something, because how do you think Germany, now we are in Berlin, and we talked a lot about Saudi Arabia, how do you think Germany could put pressure to Saudi Arabia to support your causes?
Exactly.
Okay,
by boycotting all forms of political and collateral economical agreements between Saudi Arabia and Germany. This will certainly pressure the Saudi to respond to the international solidarity journalism that is happening. If you think about it in the case of Jamal Khashoggi earlier, one of the journalists spoke about it, without the boycott and the activism from the journalists internationally, there would have not been a confession from the Saudi government about the case. So it's important for the journalists to keep the spotlight on the cases of women in prison in Saudi Arabia. And it's also important to keep it on the local level to remind the government that even though the Saudi government is at the moment trying to make some reforms that are very superficial and cosmetic, There's still the war going on in Yemen. There's still the violations of human rights that are happening. The prisoners who are, called for those reforms are still in prison. So I believe that would be through keeping the spotlight on the issue in Germany and also international level.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I would like to give you just some flowers. If it's okay for you, it's a little heavy, but yeah. Thank you for being here, for joining us. And now, let's look at the nominees for the Award for Independence.
Nominated for Reporters Without Borders 2019 Prize for Independence are Caroline Muscat from Malta. After fellow Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia was murdered in October 2017, Caroline Muscat helped to create The Shift News, an independent investigative news website committed to combating corruption and defending press freedom in Malta. In this small island nation, where most media outlets are subservient to the government, Muscat has exposed many cases of corruption, implicating local politicians. Despite being the repeated target of gag suits, The Shift News has refused to comply with content takedown demands from Henley & Partners, a British firm that advises governments on citizenship by investment policy. Muscat has received many awards for her journalism, including from the European Commission. Dawn from Pakistan. Pakistan's oldest daily newspaper, an embodiment of painstaking and outspoken journalism, is now the only major media outlet still resisting pressure from Pakistan's military. A state within the state, the armed forces has been stepping up pressure on the media to respect its red lines and adopt the official discourse. An especially shocking method was used to undermine Dawn's independence in the run-up to the July 2018 elections, when the security forces simply blocked its distribution. This year, the military have ordered companies not to buy advertising space in Dawn in a new attempt to destroy its economic viability and force it to toe the line. The newspaper's management and editors have nonetheless decided to resist the pressure using the strength of their journalistic independence. Amadou Vamouké from Cameroon. One of the leading representatives of committed journalism in Cameroon and a strong supporter of decriminalizing press offences and ending the state's monopoly of TV broadcasting, Amadou Vamouké has been jailed since July 2016. He is accused of misusing €6 million in public funds that were spent on the state radio and TV broadcaster CRTV, which he headed for 9 years. With no witnesses and no evidence to support the accusation, his trial has already been postponed more than 20 times. He is clearly paying the price for his commitment to journalistic ethics and editorial independence, which he showed by covering very sensitive stories, such as the fight against the jihadi terrorist group Boko Haram, despite the misgivings of his superiors. Confidencial from Nicaragua. A weekly created in 1991, Confidencial is one of Nicaragua's most respected independent media outlets. Because of the quality of its investigative reporting and analyses of the country's political and economic situation, its journalists have been subjected to repeated harassment but have never wavered in their commitment to journalistic ethics and independence. The environment has become more and more polarized and dangerous for its staff since the start of a major wave of anti-government protests in April 2018. Because of the many death threats, editor Carlos Fernando Chamorro has had to flee to neighboring Costa Rica. He continues to edit the weekly from there.
Please, another round of applause, because I think some of them just see us watching the live stream. Thank you for your work. Thank you so much. That is your applause. Because it's not all about winning this award, it's to be nominated, so please. Now I'd like to welcome my fellow news anchor from France. She will announce the winner of the Independence Award. Please welcome on stage Nidia Pagliara.
Meine Damen und Herren, guten Abend. Entschuldigung, ich habe meine Deutsch vergessen. Ich war in der Schule gelernt. It was 20 years ago, so let me continue in English. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. TV5 Monde is, of course, delighted to sponsor the Reporter Without Borders, the Reporter Sans Frontières 2019 Press Freedom Awards. We are a long-term partner of RSF, and it has been wonderful to watch RSF grow and open offices all over the world. And tonight, it's a great honor for us to present the Prize for Independence to Caroline Muscat, Caroline Muscat from Malta. Congratulations, Caroline. We just saw here a short presentation of who you are as a brilliant journalist, of your wonderful work in Malta, which is, by the way, 77th in the World Press Freedom Index. I just wanted to remind once again that specifically today, we don't forget Daphne Caruana Galizia, your Maltese fellow journalist, who was murdered in October 2017. Few weeks later, you co-edited a book, Invicta, about her life and work. And that was a kind of turning point in your career, we can say that. You decided also to fight against corruption and to defend press freedom in Malta and help create this website, The Shift News. Congratulations, Caroline, because we live in an era where mistrust, hatred, and violence are growing every day against journalists, relayed by anti-democratic political leaders all over the world, not only in Europe, of course, but also in America, in Asia, in Africa. Tonight, our thoughts are also for all those journalists who were murdered, imprisoned, while exercising their profession throughout the world, some of whom was nominated this evening, like Amadou Vamoulkale from Cameroon, and many others, of course. And I take this opportunity to congratulate RSF, who is doing a great job in making us aware of this situation, which is getting worse year after year. But it's, of course, our responsibility as citizens, but also as media professionals, to be conscious, to be informed, and try to inform in the most impartial way. But it's, so now I wish you a good evening to everyone, and congratulations. Again, Caroline Muscat.
Thank you for this honor. Thank you, Reporters Without Borders, for all the support that you give to journalists around the world, journalists who are at risk, who are imprisoned, and also for your work to ensure that those of us who did not make it are never forgotten. I would not be here speaking to you today unless Daphne Caruana Galizia had been assassinated in a car bomb a few meters away from her home on 16th October 2017. She was a journalist who shone a light on corruption in the country. She did that with professionalism and with integrity, and for that she paid the price, the highest price you could ever pay. It is our responsibility to step up when our profession is being attacked. We come from different political contexts, different social contexts, problems, but at the end of the day, we all come together in our pursuit for truth. And without justice for those of us who have been targeted, then impunity strengthens the hands of the corrupt. When we launched the Shift News, we were immediately hit with a financially crippling lawsuit that essentially it was within 3 weeks of our launch. So it was fight this or just shut down immediately. And we did what nobody expected. We published the threat and we fought them all the way. This helped other newsrooms to face the same challenge in the same way, because after we took that action, it emerged that in fact most of the mainstream media in Malta had taken down the stories already and had not informed the public. So our action shed light on how big corporations and political parties are silencing the media, not only in Malta but in Europe too. So as journalists, we don't need to be heroes. We should not need to risk our lives or our peace of mind to do our jobs in the public interest. And the fact that we are sometimes recognized as such says more about our countries of operation than it does about us. So it's almost 2 years since Daphne has been assassinated. And in a country of 500,000 people, our government won't tell us who wanted her silenced. Interpret that as you will, but for that reason, we must never ever stop our fight for justice, and we must never stop showing solidarity with each other when one of us is targeted. In that sense, this award is dedicated to Daphne Caruana Galizia and to her family, who continue to pursue justice against all odds. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you. Congratulations. Happy to have you here. May I ask a question? Is it okay? Yeah, okay. Do you perceive a growing pressure on journalists in whole Europe?
Yes. The impact of, after the Daphne Caruana Galizia, there was also Jan Kuciak killed in Slovakia. Jan was killed a few months after Daphne. The investigation there has still moved much further than the investigation on Daphne in Malta. And if a government in a European Union country is allowed to get away with such an act with impunity, then it is going to affect press freedom in Europe. So this is not a problem for Malta, this is a problem for Europe and for the rest of the world. We have to unite together.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So please. Thank you too. Yeah, it's really heavy stuff. What amazing, but of course also heart-wrenching stories we have heard tonight and we will hear tonight. But also what a nice evening having you all here. And I think let's all take a deep breath and enjoy the music of Project Guzu. They are just waiting there. It's Dada Fasi meets drum and punk. Just hear for yourself.
نفسه بنفاس أريد المسح بالصوت نفسه بنفاس أريد المسح بالصوت ببار بدو 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 ببار بدو 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 ببار بدو 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 ببار بربسكو نفسه بنفاس أريد المسح بالصوت نفسه بنفاس أريد المسح بالصوت ببار بدو 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 ببار بدو 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 ببار بدو 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 ببار پروازکو نفسه بنفاس أريد المسح بالصوت نفسه بنفاس أريد المساف الصوت أكسجين وقد كنت دورا ميترك هوای محبت بالا نفس کشید برمیگردم وطن بال خونه دیدم به پا حواس کن به پا حواس کن به پا بده مدتی و نقصه دیگه با قصه خودش فرق میکنه تو خونه میشه غریبه تو خیابونم حل تو خاطرات فامی از الان تا اخه خورجیه کافه کسف در بکنس مامان عزیز پدر که هیچ تبون بشت بدا چه اونه امیز لجه کسف جز برا بیرست میتازم بترکم همه چیخ تو پاشه بذار بینیم و بشکنیم دوباره مرتب شه میتازم بترکم همه چیخ تو پاشه بذار بینیم و بشکنیم دوباره مرتب شه کافه کسف در بکنس مامان عزیز پدر که هیچ تبون بشت بدا چه اونه امیز لجه گزیف جز برا نخدا وطن کسننم نجات کیره بابار شخصیت بی احترام بیباش از فارسیم لا بیباش از فارسیم 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 پیدا مدتی و نقصه دیگه با قصد خودش فرق میکنه تو خونه میشه غریبه تو خیابونه محل تو خاطرات فامی از الان تا اخه خورجی کفا کسف تبکنس مامان عزیز پدر که هیچ تبون بشت بدا چه اونه امنیز لجه کسف جز برا اکسیژن وقت کن دارم میترکم حوض کردم علف بکشم اکسیژن وقت کن دارم میترکم حوض کردم علف بکشم مرتب شه میترسم بترکم همه چیخ تو پاشه بذار بینیم و بشکنیم دوباره مرتب شه میترسم بترکم همه چیخ تو پاشه بذار بینیم و بشکنیم دوباره کمک کن که مرتب شه نازو بمیره کمک کن که مرتب شه مرتب شه نازو بمیره کمک کن که مرتب شه مرتب شه مرتب شه برو خدا وطن کسننم نجات کیره بابا شخصیت بی احترام بیباش از فارسیم لا بیباش از فارسیم بیباش از فارسیم لا بیباش از فارسیم بیباش از فارسیم لا بیباش از فارسیم بیباش از فارسیم لا بیباش از فارسیم
Thanks to Guzu. We will hear them later again, so thank you so much, Guzu. And now let's look at the nominees for the award for Impact.
Nominated for Reporters Without Borders 2019 Prize for Impact are Liu Guang from China. The well-known Chinese photojournalist Liu Guang documents social issues and environmental problems resulting from rapid industrial development in what is now the world's second biggest economy. His aim, above all, is to draw the Chinese government's attention to the gravity of the level of pollution in China. His series on cancer villages highlights the health effects of water polluted by industrial waste on those living near factories. His portraits of AIDS villagers earned him one of his 3 World Press Photo Awards. Based in New York since 2005, he was arrested during a return visit to China in Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang province, after meeting with local photographers on the 3rd of November 2018. Bihus.info from Ukraine. A reporting collective created by investigative journalist Denis Bihus, Bihus.info left its mark on Ukraine's 2019 presidential election. As a result of its revelations about massive defense sector embezzlement implicating President Petro Poroshenko's inner circle, Poroshenko was forced to fire a close associate, the National Security Council's vice president. Bihus has been well known in Ukraine since 2013, when he launched Nachi Rochi, an investigative current affairs program on Zik TV that was very popular. In a country in which corruption is the mother of all evils, his reporting has led to the dismissal and the prosecution of many corrupt senior officials. He plans to continue. Pham Doan Trang from Vietnam. Operating in what is one of the world's most oppressive environments for dissident journalists, Pham Doan Trang is the founder of Luat Khoa, an online magazine that specializes in providing information about legal issues. She's also the editor of The Vietnamese, which helps citizens to defend their rights and resist the Communist Party's arbitrary rule. She has also written many books, including one defending the rights of Vietnam's LGBT communities. 10 years after its publication, Vietnam has paradoxically become one of the countries at the forefront of this issue, decriminalizing same-sex marriage. Pham Doan Trang has been beaten by the police because of her work and was detained arbitrarily twice for several days in 2018. Sudanese Journalist Network from Sudan. The Sudanese Journalist Network has kept international human rights and press freedom NGOs such as RSF informed of the seizures of newspapers and the hundreds of arrests of journalists by President Omar al-Bashir's police and security forces, especially the National Intelligence and Security Service in the past year. The SJN has also organized demonstrations to demand the release of detained journalists and to protect against press freedom violations, despite all the risks resulting from an environment of extreme hostility towards the media. The campaigning helped obtain leading newspaper editor Osman Mirgani's release in March 2019.
Another round of applause. If they see us in the live stream, thank you so much for your work. There's the camera. Thank you. And next, please welcome a friend of mine. Ah, there she is. Katja, come on. Katja Gloger, she's member of board of Reporter ohne Grenzen, and I know she really, really cares deeply about the work you do. As a journalist herself, she understands the challenges you face. So please welcome Katja Gloger.
Thank you very much, dear Pinar. And the Press Freedom Award 2019 for Impact goes to Pham Doan Trang from Vietnam. So we honor 3 women tonight. What a progress it is, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, just imagine you live in a country where democratic rights exist only on paper. A country like Vietnam, where power is concentrated in the hands of a ruling party. A regime demanding above all obedience. Imagine how much courage it takes to leave the relative safety of your own personal life. What it takes to risk your career as a successful journalist, your privileges. What it also takes to put the well-being of your family, of your loved ones into peril. And how much determination it needs to stand up against a power machine. Imagine you go into the unknown. Maybe you cannot imagine not to live free. This is the decision Pham Duan Trung made. Trung decided to embark into the unknown to set hope against fear. She quit her career as a journalist tolerated by the regime. She co-founded the online newspaper, we've seen it, The Vietnamese, and the online magazine Luat Koha, translated legal initiatives for Vietnam, mainly informing about legal issues, the penal code, and the law. People in Vietnam can still access them. The regime has yet to build a great firewall after the Chinese model. But Vietnam is one of the biggest suppressors of critical voices in Asia, trailing only China. More than 100 democracy activists were arrested only last year. Many more had to leave the country, and the regime does not hesitate to abduct Vietnamese citizens out of other sovereign countries, be it a former Vietnamese official out of Germany, right here in Berlin, by the way, 2 years ago, or out of Bangkok this year, where a well-known critical blogger disappeared only to be thrown into prison in Vietnam. Vietnam, by the way, is regarded to be a strategic economic partner for Germany. In this context, Trung's books are even more courageous, be it politics for the common people, or nonviolent resistance techniques, or a handbook for political prisoners. These books do not only expose the dirty secrets of the regimes, the dealings of the very few and mighty in special economic zones. They do way, way more. By introducing the basic concepts of law and human rights and informing about techniques of peaceful engagement, they bring lasting knowledge to the people. They are tools for building a democratic society. And in this sense, Trung is a proponent of the enlightenment in the very, very best sense of the word. And her books, they are handbooks for freedom. This is why these books are published only clandestinely in Vietnam. And this is why Trung cannot be with us here tonight. She was arrested several times, was kept under house arrest, and has been robbed. She is now, as I understand, without registration papers, which makes it almost impossible for her to find employment or a place to live, not even to speak of travel. Dat Vom, they call this life in hiding, sleeping rough. She is 41 years old now, grateful for the help of many people, facing an uncertain future. She cannot go home. "I'm so tired," she once said. There is another Vietnamese saying expressing the state of mind of those who sacrifice a lot themselves in order to help others perceive the values of human rights. They call it the beauty of brokenness. Trung cannot be with us physically tonight, but she is with us tonight, and even in a double way. She sent us a message by video, and she sent us someone, another very courageous citizen from Vietnam, her editor-in-chief and friend, Mr. Trinh Hu Long. He is here with us tonight, and he will accept the award on her behalf and address you on her behalf as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Pham Duan Trung for the Prize for Impact. We express our deepest respect by applauding the difference she makes. A fearless life, she says, is always inspiring and worth living. So thank you very much, Trung, and we very much hope you are in a safe place now, enjoying this moment. Thank you.
greetings from Vietnam, the land of no press freedom, no political freedom, and the land where there is a small group of people who are still fighting for freedom every single day.
Chiều chiều ra đứng tây lầu tây tây lầu tây thấy cô tang tình mà gánh nước tưới cây ngô đồng xùi ai xùi trong lòng tôi thương cô tưới cây ngô đồng.
You've listened to Liu Xiaobo, a Vietnamese folk song. In Vietnam we have the First Amendment, but it doesn't mean anything. Vietnam is still ranked almost last in the World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders. We have nearly 1,000 official media outlets, but only one editor-in-chief, who is the head of the propaganda department of the Communist Party. We have nearly 20,000 journalists with press card, or journalists who are licensed to practice. And also at the same time, we have thousands of people who have been imprisoned for the past 2 decades, just because they spoke up their mind. We have all the human rights guaranteed by the Constitution. But you know, in fact, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than the others. What means something, what really means something, is also we have small groups of people who are still fighting drastically and passionately for freedom every single day. We do have independent media agencies, though very small and very vulnerable, very weak, very vulnerable. The Lola Law and the Vietnamese magazines that I co-founded are just 5 and 2 years old, respectively. And we have the Vietnam Times or Vietnam Thời Báo, run by the Independent Association of Journalists of Vietnam, which is just a few months older than the Lola Law and the Vietnamese. Of course, the more equal than others animals like to see us as losers, as their hostile forces, as a state enemy of the people, and fake news producers. They do everything they can to harm us, to destroy us. But it doesn't matter much to us, because we have what they don't have. We have a passion for truth. We have commitment to changes, and we have hope. Yes, we have hope. The hope that Vietnam will be changing and will soon turn into a democracy, turn into a free and democratic country where journalists like me, like us, can travel everywhere, not to hide from the police, but to listen to unheard voices, to tell untold stories, to bring information and knowledge to the people. It is also for those who are seeking truth, who are fighting for truth, drastically and passionately everywhere in the world. Many people have said this, but I would love to say it again to everyone in, say, the Philippines, Cuba, North Korea, Hong Kong, Vietnam, China, and the United States as well. To everyone who is still think of journalism as a kind of crime, or fake news producers, or hostile forces, or state enemy, I'd like to say that no, journalism is not a crime. And we will fight until journalism is no longer being seen as a crime in anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very, very much, Reporters Without Borders, for giving this award to my colleague, my mentor, my sister, my closest confidant, and most of all, my source of inspiration. Pham Doan Trang, she is not here today because she has pledged to never leave Vietnam until Vietnam becomes a democracy. On these very days 10 years ago, Doan Trang was living some of the most miserable time of her life after being kidnapped and unlawfully detained for 9 days by the Vietnamese police. Back then, she was known as one of the finest journalists of the mainstream media in Vietnam. But overnight, she became one of the most isolated journalists in the country and an enemy of the state. She then transformed herself into a democracy activist, using her pen, or her keyboard to be exact, to make political changes. Writing was no longer her profession. It became her mission. I had the fortune to meet Doan Trang 2 years later during a protest movement in Hanoi in 2011, when I also decided to become a democracy activist and a journalist. And one of the best things that have happened in my life was meeting her, to work with her, and to be close to her. She taught me journalism, real journalism, independent journalism, not the kind of journalism that obeys government's will. And with teaching me independent journalism, she taught me bravery and freedom. Doan Trang has always been a fearless journalist. She throws herself into situations that almost no one wants to be close to cover. She cares not about what the government thinks. She only focuses on doing the right thing. However, that is not the best thing she has taught me yet. The best thing was she taught me kindness. Doan Trang is one of the kindest people I have ever met in my life. She cares about others way more than herself. I know that firsthand. She has made me a much better person than I was before. She has sacrificed everything to make free press and democracy a reality in Vietnam. As a result of police brutality and years of hard working, she is now struggling with severe injuries in her arms and legs. One of the issues that Doan Trang and I are deeply concerned about at this moment is what happens in Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to take this privileged opportunity to speak for the people of Hong Kong. The democracy movement in Hong Kong deserves much more attention and actions from us. They are fighting against the authoritarian rule of China. Beijing directly threatens free press, human rights, and the rule of law of Hong Kong. China is far from here, but we in Vietnam know exactly what living next to China is like. Doan Trang and I met for the very first time during a protest movement demanding human rights. But a big part of that movement was anti-China, because China was and still is one of the biggest threats to free press and democracy around the world. Hong Kong is fighting China for us. Their fight is our fight. Let us all support Hong Kong, rally behind them, and win this fight. Thank you very much.
We just talked about Hong Kong and China. What do you expect from the Germans, from the German government, when it comes to Hong Kong, China, and Vietnam?
As you know, Joshua Wang probably is here today advocating for his cause for democracy in Hong Kong. And we think that not only Germany, but the European Union has a very powerful tool to promote democracy, human rights, and rule of law in Hong Kong, in China, in Vietnam, many places around the world, by using the trade agreements, negotiations, to put more pressure to those countries, to those governments, force them to respect human rights and democracy around the world.
Thank you. Please, I give them to you. Thank you so much. Last but not least, well, many of our supporters can't be with us tonight. Edward Snowden, for example, but he sent us a message, and please welcome his lawyer, Wolfgang Quebec. He's going to tell us what he just wrote us. Please welcome.
Good evening. Here's the message. Dear friends and colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this important event. Tonight, I speak not only on my behalf, but also as the president of the Freedom of the Press Foundation. I'm sorry not to be with you today, but I want to congratulate you for your very important work in these dangerous times for journalists all over the world. The recent murders of journalists in Slovakia and Malta, as well as the espionage charges against WikiLeaks editor Julian Assange for publishing truthful information, show us all too clearly that repression of the free press is no longer confined to distant dictators. Moreover, the use of increasingly sophisticated surveillance techniques is a growing danger. I commend you for the efforts to hold the German company Finfisher liable for the export of dangerous surveillance techniques to Turkey. I hope to attend your next anniversary in person and hope for the future cooperation between your organization and ours. In solidarity, Edward Snowden.
Thank you so much. So, a short message from Edward Snowden. Thank you. And some others sent us a video message. Let's have a look.
Ohne Meinungsfreiheit gibt es keine freie Gesellschaft, ohne Pressefreiheit gibt es keine Demokratie. Und deshalb ist es nicht nur ein hohes Gut, wenn Journalistinnen und Journalisten berichten können, ohne Angst um ihr Leben haben zu müssen. Es ist ein fundamentales Menschenrecht. Was für uns wie eine Selbstverständlichkeit klingt, das ist in sehr vielen Ländern dieser Welt alles andere als selbstverständlich. Und deshalb ist der Einsatz für Pressefreiheit so relevant, auch bei uns.
No one told us it's going to be easy. In countries like Azerbaijan, you can be beaten, jailed, or even killed for telling the truth. Today, on this anniversary, I want to congratulate all those who step on this path, despite the risks, because other people's right to know is much more important than our safety. And thank you all those who support us on this endeavor.
Ich wünsche Reporter ohne Grenzen alles Gute zum Geburtstag. Vor allem wünsche ich Reporter ohne Grenzen künftig möglichst wenig Arbeit. Möglichst wenig Journalistinnen und Journalisten weltweit, die im Gefängnis sitzen für das, was sie tun. Möglichst wenig Journalisten weltweit, die bedroht oder im schlimmsten Fall sogar ermordet werden.
Il n'y a pas de démocratie sans liberté d'expression. Et ce regard que peut jeter le journaliste ou le simple citoyen dans un blog sur ce qui gouverne est extrêmement important, extrêmement salutaire pour qu'une démocratie soit saine et qu'elle ne soit pas en dysfonction par rapport aux lobbies qui cherchent par tous les moyens à contrôler cette liberté d'expression et à la fourvoyer pour la soumettre à leurs intérêts.
Der Ansatz von Reporter ohne Grenzen ist genau richtig. Die Welt ist eng und klein geworden und wir sind alle voneinander abhängig und es ist wichtig, dass wir einen freien Fluss von Informationen haben und eine fortschreitende Demokratisierung der Welt und das wird ohne freie Presse und freie Information natürlich niemals gelingen. Deshalb herzlichen Glückwunsch und vor allem weiter so. Vielen Dank.
In Deutschland haben wir das Glück, dass Pressefreiheit herrscht. Garantiert im Artikel 5 des Grundgesetzes. Nicht in allen Ländern der Welt ist dies der Fall. Reporter ohne Grenzen setzt sich ein für verfolgte Journalisten, deckt auf, informiert und schützt bedrohte Journalisten und Intellektuelle.
The freedom of speech is a fundamental human right for all people living all over the world, but it's an important right, especially for those journalists and activists who live in areas controlled by authoritarian governments, so they can be the voice of the voiceless. Today, on the 25th anniversary for Reporters Without Borders in Germany, I wish them a happy birthday and I wish that they would keep the fight that they're fighting for journalists and activists all over the world.
Sorry for having this smartphone, but there just arrived another message coming from Pham Dong Trang. She's watching us. She says, I'm watching. I'm so moved. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Yeah, that's all. What an inspiring night. Thank you so much. I was honored to be your host tonight. And before we can have a small glass of wine or 2 or 3 or 4, I want to say bye, and we want to listen to Guzi again. Thanks. Good evening.
Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, the Tunashut and the Boshi Gunamangushot, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, and the Shut Huda is the Dodish on the dot. Watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, the Morish Boboshat, a mambo, Neko Gado, Mambo, Neko Gado, Pistol, Azizam Dir Misha, take a peer, Misha, dig a border, that's Bohudiga, Pistol, Azizam Dir Misha, dig a peer, Misha, dig a border, show, Beggy Digger, show, a big dig, show, a big dig, show, a big dig, show, a big dig, no, Mătădă de zame romne ki bară gesu, ki bară zuri, ki bară shap. Mătădă de zame romne ki bară gesu, ki bară zuri, ki bară shap. Mătădă de zame romne ki bară gesu, ki bară zuri, ki bară shap. Mătădă de zame romne ki bară gesu, ki bară zuri, ki bară shap. Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, the Tunashut and the Boshi Gunamangushot, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, Solomon Eliam Bamadabunam the Roses, and the Shudam Huda is the Dodish on the dot. Watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, finish the Boboshat, watch, hey, the Morish Boboshat, Amungo, not Yado, Bemango, not Yado, Bemango. Azizam dir mishe peer mishe dige boru şu an beklidige müstahsali azizam dir mishe dige peer mishe dige boru ders kokum dige show beklidige show beklidige show beklidige show beklidige no нет so, Vicky Bada, shop, shop, shop. Ma tête du femme comme Vicky Bada, que so, Vicky Bada, so, Vicky Bada, shop, shop, shop. Ma tête du femme comme Vicky Bada, que so, Vicky Bada, so, Vicky Bada, shop, shop, shop. Ma tête du femme comme Vicky Bada, que so, Vicky Bada, so, Vicky Bada, shop, shop, shop.